The crystalline spires of Velthara Prime gleamed like frozen starlight. Against the purple twilight sky, Lieutenant Rain Carter adjusted his diplomatic uniform's collar, feeling distinctly out of place among the ethereal alien nobles floating through the grand ballroom. Their translucent wings caught the light from the floating crystal chandeliers, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors. Stay close, but inconspicuous, Ambassador Thorne had instructed before disappearing into the crowd of dignitaries. Easy enough for him to say the seasoned diplomat had experience with alien customs. Rain was just muscle with a badge, here to keep the ambassador breathing. The Veltharans were beautiful in an otherworldly way, tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Most had silver hair that floated, as if underwater, though he'd noticed some variations. Their large, violet eyes held an ancient wisdom that made him feel like a child by comparison. Rain found a position near one of the massive crystal pillars, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to avoid diplomatic incidents. He was observing the crowd when musical laughter drew his attention upward. 3 figures descended the floating staircase, and every head in the room turned to watch. The royal princesses of Velthara, prime daughters of High King Velter himself. Unlike the other Veltharans, these 3 had striking red curls that cascaded down their backs like liquid fire, a rare genetic trait that marked them as true royalty. Princess Alira led the trio, her bearing regal and composed. Her ice-blue eyes swept the room with calculating intelligence. Behind her came Princess Scyllin, moving with a warrior's grace, her hand resting casually on the hilt of a ceremonial blade. The youngest, Princess Vexa, floated slightly apart from her sisters, a small device in her hands that projected holographic symbols. Their pale blue skin seemed to glow more brightly than the other nobles, and when they moved, reality itself seemed to bend slightly round them, a sign of their immense telepathic power. "Look, sisters," Alira's melodious voice carried clearly across the ballroom, though she spoke in the common galactic tongue rather than their native language. "A primitive has wandered into our gathering." Rain realized with growing unease that all 3 pairs of violet eyes were fixed on him. Scylin's laugh was sharp as crystal breaking. "How quaint! Look at that crude fabric covering. Do humans still require such primitive coverings for their weak flesh?" "Fascinating," Vexa added, her tone clinical but cutting. "No telepathic emanations whatsoever. How do they even communicate?" "Complex thoughts, through those crude mouth sounds, I suppose." The gathered nobles began to take notice, some floating closer to witness the spectacle. Rain felt heat rise in his cheeks, but maintained his professional composure. He'd faced worse than spoiled alien royalty. 2 arms, 2 legs, Alira continued, her assessment as if he were a specimen. So symmetrical, so limited. No additional sensory organs, no telepathic capability. How does such a species even achieve space travel? "Perhaps they're kept as pets by more advanced races," Scyllin suggested with mock innocence. The crowd was openly staring now, some aliens making what he assumed were the Veltharan equivalent of snickers. Rain noticed Ambassador Thorne pushing through the crowd, his face pale with diplomatic horror. But something else was happening. The laughter was dying away, replaced by shocked whispers. Several of the older nobles were backing away, their expressions shifting from amusement to alarm. An ancient voice cut through the murmur like a blade. "By the 3 moons," rasped Elder Corvain, the king's chief advisor, his violet eyes wide with horror, "the Kethmoran has been invoked." The princess's expressions shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion. "What?" Alira demanded. "You have publicly mocked an honorable guest of the realm," Elder Corvain intoned, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "The ancient law of Kethmoran is clear. Such insult demands either blood satisfaction or the binding ritual. The choice belongs to the insulted party." The ballroom fell deathly silent. Rain felt every eye upon him, but his attention was fixed on the 3 princesses who had gone from predators to prey in the span of a heartbeat. "I don't understand," Vexa whispered. "If he accepts the challenge," Elder Corvain explained, his voice grave, "you 3 become his honor-bound mates, by blood and soul, until death parts you. The law is absolute. Even royal blood cannot break it." Rain looked at the three alien princesses, beautiful, powerful, and suddenly very afraid. They had humiliated him publicly, treated him like an animal in a zoo. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let them stew in their own arrogance. But another part of him, the part that had always been drawn to impossible challenges, was intrigued. Ambassador Thorne finally reached him, grabbing his arm. "Rain, don't even think about, I accept," Rain said clearly, his voice carrying across the crystalline chamber. The sound that erupted from the crowd was unlike anything he'd ever heard. Part gasp, part wail, part crystalline chime of shock. The three princesses stared at him in absolute horror, their pale blue skin somehow growing even paler. High King Velter materialized in the center of the room in a flash of silver light, his ancient face grave. "The words are spoken, the law invoked. By the blood of my ancestors and the power of the three moons, let the Kethmoran be sealed." Rain smiled slightly as power beyond his understanding began to swirl around them. "Your Highnesses," he said, with a slight bow to the three princesses who were now, by alien law, bound to become his wives. "I looked forward to getting to know you better." The royal transport ship Velthara's Grace cut through hyperspace toward the rebellious Kethmer system, carrying what many considered either salvation or doom for the royal house. Rain stood in the ship's observation deck, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace when Alira joined him. Having second thoughts, she asked, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. "About the mission?" "No, about everything else." He turned to face her, taking in the way her red curls floated slightly in the ship's artificial gravity. "Are we really going to pretend that what's happening between us is just the blood oath?" Alira's composed mask slipped for a moment, revealing the woman beneath the princess. "What do you want me to say, Rain? That I've fallen for the human who was forced upon me by ancient law? That every strategic instinct I possess screams that this is dangerous, while every other part of me wants to surrender to what I feel through our bond?" Instead of answering, he pulled her into his arms. This time, when they kissed, there was no desperation, no fear, only passion, and the growing certainty that what they shared transcended magical compulsion. Her telepathic presence merged with his consciousness, and for a moment, they were truly one being. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, the admission seeming to surprise her as much as him. "By the three moons, I love you. And I don't care if it's the bond or something deeper." "It's deeper," Rain assured her, his hands tangling in her flame-colored hair. "The bond just gave us permission to feel it." Their intimate moment was interrupted by Scyllane's voice over the ship's communication system. "Rain, I need you in the training bay now." They found Scyllane surrounded by holographic combat scenarios, her pale blue skin glistening with perspiration from intense training. She'd pushed herself hard, and Rain could sense her restless energy through their connection. "We'll be at Kethmer in 6 hours, she said without preamble. "If this goes wrong, if we end up in actual combat, I need to know you can keep up with me." "Scyllane," Alira began, but the warrior princess cut her off. "No, you've had your time with him, sister. I need to know that my battle partner won't get himself killed protecting me when I can protect myself." Rain understood. This wasn't about training, this was about trust, about Scyllane needing to know that he saw her as an equal partner, rather than someone to be protected. "Show me," he said simply. For the next 2 hours, they fought. Not the careful sparring they'd done before, but real combat weapons on maximum. Stun, alien martial arts against human military training. Scyllane was faster, stronger, with centuries of warrior training, but Rain was unpredictable, innovative, and absolutely relentless. When they finally collapsed against each other, both breathing hard, Scyllane's violet eyes were blazing with something far more intense than combat adrenaline. "You magnificent bastard," she gasped, and then she was kissing him with the same fierce intensity she brought to battle. Her warrior's passion was overwhelming all fire and demand and raw need. When her hands began pulling at his uniform, he didn't resist. Their lovemaking was as intense as their fighting, passionate, athletic, and completely uninhibited. Scyllane's alien strength and human flexibility combined into something beautiful and wild. Afterward, as they lay entwined on the training mats, she traced patterns on his chest with one finger. "I never expected to feel this," she admitted quietly. Warriors are taught that love is weakness, that emotional attachments compromise tactical judgment. What do you think now? Now I think that fighting beside someone you love doesn't make you weaker, it makes you unstoppable. They were interrupted by Vex's excited voice echoing through the ship. Rain, you need to see this. They found the youngest princess in her mobile laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Kethmer system. Her red curls were disheveled from hours of intense work, and her violet eyes sparkled with discovery. I've been analyzing the rebel communications, she said rapidly, her scientific excitement overriding social niceties. They're not just rebelling against the royal house, they're being manipulated by an external force. Look at these transmission patterns. Rain studied the data while Lyra and Scylla joined them. His tactical training helped him see what Vexa had discovered. Someone's been feeding them information about our movements, our capabilities. This isn't random rebellion, it's coordinated warfare. Exactly. Vex's enthusiasm was infectious. But here's the beautiful part, I've been studying human information warfare techniques. From your diplomatic files, I know how to turn their own manipulation tactics against them. As she explained her plan, Rain found himself amazed once again by her brilliant mind. When she finally finished, flushed with excitement and pride in her work, he couldn't help himself. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Unlike Alira's passionate desperation or Scylla's fierce demand, Vex's response was tender, curious, almost experimental. Her scientific mind seemed to be cataloging every sensation even as she surrendered to the emotion behind it. I've been studying human mating customs, she whispered when they broke apart, her pale blue skin flushed with deeper color. The literature suggests that physical intimacy enhances emotional bonding. But I wanted to understand the phenomenon firsthand. And your conclusions, Doctor? Rain asked, amused by her clinical approach even in the midst of passion. That the literature vastly underestimated the intensity of the experience, she replied. And then she was pulling him toward her private quarters. Vex's lovemaking was a revelation, curious, thorough, and surprisingly passionate once her scientific reserve melted away. She approached intimacy the same way she approached everything else, with intense focus and a desire to understand every nuance. The combination of her alien anatomy and human curiosity created experiences unlike anything Rain had ever imagined. Afterward, as they lay together in her bed surrounded by floating holographic displays showing star charts and tactical data, Vexa traced the outline of his face with gentle fingers. The blood oath has changed, she said quietly. I've been monitoring our biosignatures, our brain activity during these intimate moments. The magical compulsion is gone, Rain. What we feel now is entirely our choice. How long have you known? Since the night you saved me from the assassins. The oath evolved from compulsion to connection, from magical slavery to emotional partnership. Her violet eyes met his. We're free to choose, and I choose you. Not because ancient law demands it, but because everything I am wants to be yours. The ship's proximity alarms interrupted their moment, announcing their arrival at Kethmer, as they prepared for what could be the battle that would decide the fate of the royal house. Rain looked at his three wives, brilliant Vexa with her scientific mind and hidden passion, fierce Scylla with her warrior's heart and protective fire, elegant Alira with her political acumen and vulnerable strength. What had begun as an insult in a crystal ballroom had become something none of them had expected. A love that could conquer kingdoms. Now they just had to prove it to the galaxy. 3 days had passed since the assassination attempt, and the dynamic in their shared quarters had shifted subtly but unmistakably. Rain found himself studying his 3 alien wives a term. He was slowly growing accustomed to as they went about their daily routines. Vexa had taken to including him in her research, explaining Veltheran technology and culture with an enthusiasm that bordered on eagerness. Scylla acknowledged his presence with respectful nods rather than glares, but Alira remained an enigma, watching him with those calculating violet eyes, never letting her guard down. The crown weighs heaviest at night, she said suddenly. Rain looked up from the tactical reports he'd been reviewing. They were alone in the main chamber. Scylla was training in the combat room, and Vexa was in her laboratory workshop. Alira stood on the balcony overlooking the crystal gardens, her red curls moving in the alien breeze. "I'm sorry," he said, moving to join her. "It's something my mother used to say," Alira continued, not looking at him. "During the day, you can maintain the illusion that the crown is just a symbol. But at night, when the court sleeps and the weight of every decision settles on your shoulders, that's when you feel its true burden." Rain studied her profile, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the balcony railing. "You're heir to the throne. I've been preparing to rule since I could walk. Every lesson, every diplomatic function, every strategic decision, all building toward the moment when Father passes the crown to me." She finally turned to face him, and he saw vulnerability in her eyes that she'd never shown before. "But now, how can I rule when I'm bound to an alien who doesn't even understand our most basic customs?" "Maybe that's exactly why you need me," Rain said gently. "You've been surrounded by advisors who tell you what you want to hear, subjects who defer to your telepathic presence. When did someone last challenge your assumptions?" Alira's laugh was bitter. "Challenge me? Lieutenant, you've done nothing but challenge me since the moment you accepted that binding. And how has that felt?" The question caught her off guard. She stared at him for a long moment, her alien features illuminated by the soft glow of the crystal spires. "Terrifying," she admitted finally, "and exhilarating." Before Rain could respond, she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the silver flecks in her violet eyes, smell the exotic fragrance that seemed to emanate from her pale blue skin. "You don't fear me," she whispered. "Even now, even knowing what I could do to your mind if I chose, you don't fear me, should I?" Instead of answering, she kissed him. It was sudden, almost desperate, her lips pressing against his with centuries of royal restraint finally breaking free. For a moment, Rain felt the full force of her telepathic presence, not invasive, but overwhelming in its intensity. Power, loneliness, desire, and fear all crashed through the mental connection the blood oath had created between them. When she pulled away, her breathing was unsteady. "This is madness," she said. But she didn't step back. "Maybe," Rain agreed, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "But it's our madness now." A crash from the training room interrupted the moment. They found Scylla surrounded by the wreckage of several training drones, her ceremonial blade glowing with residual energy. "Feel better?" Rain asked mildly. Scylla spun toward him, her warrior's reflexes making her blade sing through the air. Rain moved without thinking, his combat training allowing him to sidestep the strike and redirect her momentum. In seconds, he had her pinned against the training room wall, her blade arm locked behind her back. "Impressive reflexes. Human," she panted, but there was approval in her voice rather than anger. "You telegraphed the strike with your shoulders," Rain explained, releasing her carefully. "Your technique is flawless, but you're fighting angry." "I'm always angry," Scylla replied, but she was studying him with new interest. "How did you learn to fight Veltheran combat styles?" "I didn't. I learned to fight opponents who were faster and stronger than me. Same principles apply." Scylla resheathed her blade, then suddenly grabbed him by the front of his uniform. For a moment, he thought she might actually try to kill him. Instead, she pulled him into a fierce kiss, her alien strength pinning him against the wall. Unlike Alira's desperate vulnerability, Scylla's kiss was pure fire, passionate, demanding, with an edge of challenge that made his blood race. When she released him, her violet eyes were blazing. "Train with me," she demanded. "If you're going to be bound to a warrior princess, you need to learn to fight like one." The days that followed established a new routine. Mornings with Vexa in her laboratory, learning about Veltheran science and culture. Afternoons training with Scylla, pushing his combat skills to new limits. Evenings with Alira, discussing politics and strategy as she gradually opened up about the pressures of royal life. And through it all, the blood oath connection grew stronger. He could sense their emotions, now Vex's intellectual excitement. When she made a discovery, Scylla's fierce joy in combat, Alira's complex mix of duty and desire. The crisis came a week later. Elder Corvain's hologram appeared in their chamber, his ancient face grim. "The outer colonies are in rebellion," he announced without preamble. "House Thexari has convinced 3 systems that the royal line has been compromised by alien influence. They're demanding that the princesses be stripped of their succession rights. Illyra was on her feet instantly. Father's response? The High King has called for a trial of worthiness. You and your sisters must prove that your binding has strengthened. Rather than weaken the royal house, the elder's image flickered. You have one lunar cycle to end the rebellion and restore order to the outer colonies. Impossible, Scylla snarled, even with the royal fleet. It would take months to bring 3 systems back into line. But Vexa was already pulling up holographic displays, her mind racing through possibilities. Not if we approach this as a diplomatic rather than military problem. You want to negotiate with rebels, Illyra demanded. I want to give them what they claim to want, proof that the binding hasn't compromised us. Vexa turned to Rain, her violet eyes bright with excitement. What do you know about human psychological warfare? Rain felt a slow smile spread across his face. Enough to know that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make your enemies defeat themselves. That night, as they planned their strategy, Rain found himself amazed by the transformation in his 3 wives, Illyra's political acumen, Scylla's tactical brilliance, and Vexa's technological innovation created a formidable combination. And at the center of it all, the Blood Oath had evolved into something none of them had expected. What had begun as magical compulsion was becoming genuine partnership. As Vexa leaned against his shoulder while reviewing star charts, as Scylla's hand found his during a heated tactical discussion, as Illyra's fingers intertwined with his while they planned diplomatic approaches, Rain realized that the ancient law had given them something precious, not just a political alliance, but the foundation for something that could become real love if they were brave enough to let it grow. The royal chambers assigned to them felt more like a gilded prison than a palace wing. Rain examined the crystalline walls that hummed with barely contained energy, beautiful, but undoubtedly reinforced with security measures. The 3 princesses had been escorted here along with him after the binding ceremony, their wrists still glowing with the faint blue marks of the Blood Oath. This is intolerable. Princess Illyra paced the main chamber like a caged predator, her red curls whipping around her shoulders. Father cannot seriously expect us to honor this barbaric law. Scylla stood by the tall windows overlooking the crystal gardens, her hand clenched around her ceremonial blade's hilt. I should have challenged him to combat instead, at least. Then I could have killed him honorably. The binding prevents us from harming him directly, Vexa said quietly from her position at a floating desk covered in holographic displays. She'd been researching frantically since their arrival. The Blood Oath ensures loyalty, whether we will it or not. Rain settled into one of the alien chairs, which molded itself to accommodate his human physiology. I'm not your enemy, your highnesses. You're human, Illyra spat, finally stopping her pacing to face him. You're primitive, short-lived, and telepathically deaf. What could you possibly offer the royal house of Velthara? Her words stung, but Rain had endured worse during his military training. Maybe that's exactly what you need, someone who doesn't hear your thoughts, who doesn't automatically defer to your telepathic influence. Scylla turned from the window, her violet eyes blazing. You think yourself immune to our power? I think I'm the first person in years who's treated you like individuals, instead of untouchable goddesses. Rain replied calmly. That's what really bothers you. Before any of them could respond, a subtle chime indicated an incoming message. A holographic figure materialized in the center of the room, Melder Corvain, his ancient features grave. Your Highnesses, Lieutenant Carter, he began formally. I bring word from the High King. The noble houses are restless. Some see this binding as an opportunity to question the stability of the royal line. Illyra straightened, her political instincts taking over. Which houses? House Thexari leads the whispers. They suggest that princesses, who can be bound by ancient law to an alien, might not be fit to rule. The elder's image flickered slightly. There have been 2 attempts to breach the palace defenses tonight. The king requests you remain in the secure wing until the situation stabilizes. After the message ended, tension filled the chamber like a physical presence. Rain watched the 3 sisters, noting how differently they processed the threat. Illyra's mind was clearly racing through political calculations. Scylla's warrior instincts were engaged, and Vexa seemed to be analyzing tactical data. They're using our humiliation against Father, Elira said finally. Let them come, Scylla growled. I'll show them what happens to those who threaten the royal line. Violence won't solve this. Vexa interjected. We need to demonstrate that the binding hasn't weakened us. Rain stood, drawing their attention. Then let's give them something to really worry about. What do you mean? Elira demanded. You're thinking like this binding is a weakness. What if it's actually a strength? What if having a human consort gives Velthara access to human military tactics, human diplomatic networks, human technology? Vex's eyes lit up with sudden interest. The tactical applications alone, absolutely not. Elira cut her off. We will not parade our shame as if it were a victory. A soft alarm began shimming throughout the chamber. The crystalline walls shifted from their normal blue glow to pulsing red. Scylla was at the window instantly, her blade drawn. Movement in the gardens, she reported tensely. Multiple figures, moving with stealth enhancement. Rain was beside her in 3 quick strides, his trained eyes picking out details in the alien landscape. 6, no, 8 figures. Professional movement patterns. They're not here to talk. The blood oath. Vexa said suddenly, her face pale. If they kill you, we die too. The binding works both ways. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main entrance exploded inward in a shower of crystal fragments. Dark-clad figures poured through the breach, weapons raised. Rain recognized the equipment Veltharan energy disruptors, designed to overload nervous systems. Training took over. Rain grabbed Vexa, who was closest to the attackers, and rolled them both behind the heavy desk as energy bolts seared the air where she'd been standing. Scylla was already in motion, her blade singing as it deflected incoming fire. Elira had vanished, either teleported or using some other royal ability. Can you fight? Rain asked Vexa as he assessed their tactical situation. Her violet eyes were wide with shock, but she nodded. I have training, but I'm primarily a scholar. Then stay down and tell me about their weapons. Energy disruptors fired in focused beams, but they had to recharge between shots. Rain waited for the pause, then vaulted over the desk. His combat training served him well as he closed distance with the nearest attacker, using the alien's own momentum to send them crashing into the crystal wall. Scylla fought like poetry in motion. Her blade worked flawless as she engaged 3 attackers simultaneously. But even she was being pushed back by superior numbers. That's when Elira reappeared, literally materializing behind 2 of the attackers. Her telepathic abilities lashed out like invisible whips, and the assassins collapsed, clutching their heads in agony. The battle was over in minutes, but the real shock came afterward. As Rain helped Vexa to her feet, checking her for injuries, he felt something he'd never experienced before, a warm pulse of gratitude and something else flowing from her mind to his. The binding, she whispered, her pale blue skin flushed with deeper color. It's creating a connection. Scylla lowered her blade, staring at Rain with new respect. You fought well, human. Your tactics were effective. Elira approached more slowly, her calculating gaze fixed on him. You protected Vexa. Of course I did, Rain replied, gently brushing crystal dust from Vexa's red curls. She's mine to protect now. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with new meaning. For the first time since the binding, none of the princesses looked at him with pure hatred. Vexa's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. The blood oath, she said softly. I can feel it changing, becoming less about compulsion and more about choice. As palace guards finally arrived to secure the chamber, Rain caught Elira watching the way he held her sister's hand. For just a moment, he saw something other than cold calculation in her violet eyes, something that looked almost like longing. The game had changed. They were no longer just bound by ancient law, they were bound by shared danger, mutual protection, and something far more complicated than any of them were ready to admit. Tonight, they had fought together. Tomorrow, Rain suspected, would bring challenges that would test more than just their combat skills. The Kefmer system's capital world hung before them like a jewel of rebellion, its orbital defense platforms bristling with weapons aimed at their small diplomatic vessel. Rain stood on the bridge between his 3 wives, watching the tactical displays with a mixture of pride and apprehension. They're hailing us. reported the ship's captain. A grizzled veteran named Thane who'd served the royal house for decades. Open the channel. Illyra commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone born to rule. The face that appeared on the main screen was familiar from intelligence reports. Lord Vextar of House Thexari. His pale blue features twisted with contempt, his violet eyes fixed on Rain with undisguised hatred. So, the royal whores have brought their human pet to grovel for forgiveness, he sneered. How the mighty have fallen. Scyllane's hand went to her blade, but Rain caught her wrist gently. This was the moment they'd planned for, the moment when their enemy's arrogance would become his weakness. Lord Vextar, Rain said calmly. Stepping forward, I am Lieutenant Rain Carter, diplomatic representative of the Terran Federation and husband to the royal princesses of Velthara. I come to offer you a choice. Laughter echoed from the communication channel. Husband? You mean slave, surely. The ancient laws are clear, you are property. Human, nothing more. Actually, Vexa interjected, her scientific precision cutting through the mockery. The ancient laws are quite specific about the rights and responsibilities of those bound by Kethmoran. Perhaps you should have studied them more carefully before beginning your rebellion. She activated a holographic display visible to both ships, showing the legal texts in the original Veltharan script. The bound mate of a royal princess holds the rank of prince consort with full military and diplomatic authority. Any act of rebellion against the royal house is, by extension, an act of war against the Terran Federation. Rain watched Lord Vextar's expression shift from contempt to concern as the implications sank in. Moreover, he continued, the Federation has a mutual defense treaty with 17 systems in this sector. An attack on Velthara Prime would trigger automatic military response from over 300 human warships. You're bluffing, Vextar snarled, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Am I? Rain smiled. Captain Thane, please show Lord Vextar the sensor readings from the outer system. The tactical display updated, showing the energy signatures of ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Not the massive fleet the rebels expected, but a small squadron of sleek human vessels. Terran Federation ships Rora, Vigilance, and Retribution, Illyra announced formally. They're here to escort us home after our successful diplomatic mission. The truth was simpler. Ambassador Thorn had called in favors to get 3 human patrol ships to make a show of force, but combined with Vex's psychological warfare and their carefully crafted narrative, the effect was devastating. You see, Lord Vextar, Rain continued, you've made a fundamental error. You assumed that binding the princesses to a human weakened them. Instead, you've given Velthara access to the largest military alliance in the sector. Furthermore, Scyllane added, her warrior's instincts perfectly reading the moment. You've committed treason against the crown, the penalty for which is death by combat. As prince consort, my husband has the right to name a champion. I volunteer. The challenge hung in the void between the ships. Lord Vextar's forces still outnumbered them, but the psychological advantage had shifted completely. They were no longer desperate rebels facing overwhelming odds, they were criminals facing justice. The other houses, Vextar stammered, are welcome to surrender along with you. Illyra said graciously, the crown is prepared to offer amnesty to those who were misled by your rhetoric, but the offer expires in exactly 1 hour. They didn't have to wait that long. 30 minutes later, the first of the rebel ships powered down their weapons and requested permission to dock for surrender negotiations. Within an hour, only Vextar's flagship remained defiant. He's desperate now, Rain observed, watching the tactical display. Desperate people make dangerous choices, as if summoned by his words. Alarms began blaring throughout their ship. Vextar's vessel was accelerating toward them, weapons charging for a suicide run. All hands brace for impact, Captain Thane shouted, but Rain was already moving, his wives beside him. Months of training together had created an intuitive understanding between them. Illyra's telepathic abilities coordinated their movements. Scyllane's warrior skills guided their tactics, and Vex's technological expertise gave them the tools they needed. Working together, they rerouted power from the ship's diplomatic systems to its defensive arrays. The combined human-Veltheran modifications they'd developed during their journey created a shield matrix that absorbed the brunt of the enemy's assault. When the smoke cleared, Vexstar's ship was drifting, powerless, its crew requesting rescue. "Well," Rain said, helping Alira to her feet, "that was dramatic." "Indeed," agreed High King Velter, his voice coming through the communication system. His hologram materialized on the bridge, his ancient features showing pride and amusement. "A most impressive display of unity, my daughters, father," Alira exclaimed. "How long have you been monitoring?" "Since you entered the system," the king replied. "I wanted to see how you would handle your first test as a unified household." His violet eyes fixed on Rain. "You have proven yourself worthy. Prince Consort, the royal house of Velthara is stronger for your presence." The journey home was a celebration. The crew, initially skeptical of their human prince, now treated Rain with genuine respect. More importantly, the three princesses had found their balance, no longer bound by ancient law, but united by choice. The final ceremony took place in the crystal ballroom where their journey had begun. But this time, instead of mockery and magical compulsion, there was joy and willing commitment. "By the power of the three moons and the willing hearts of those who stand before me," High King Velter intoned, "I dissolve the bonds of Kethmoran and witness the creation of new vows, not of compulsion, but of love." One by one, Alira, Scylan, and Vexa renewed their vows to Rain, and he to them. The words were simple, spoken in both human and Veltheran languages, but their meaning was profound. "I choose you," Alira said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Not because law demands it, but because my heart knows no other path. I choose you." Scylan declared, her warrior's strength evident in every word, "not as weakness, but as the greatest strength I have ever known." "I choose you," Vexa concluded, her scientific precision giving way to pure emotion, "not as hypothesis, but as the one certainty in an uncertain universe." And Rain, looking at his three extraordinary wives, spoke the words that sealed their new beginning. "I choose all of you, freely and completely, for as long as the stars shine and beyond." The celebration that followed lasted 3 days. Nobles, who had once whispered about the scandal, now praised the innovative alliance. The outer systems, impressed by the display of unity and strength, renewed their loyalty to the crown. And in the quiet moments between the ceremonies and speeches, Rain and his wives found time to explore the depths of their love. 6 months later, as they stood on the balcony of their new home, a beautiful compound that blended human and Veltheran architecture, Rain reflected on the journey that had brought them together. "Any regrets?" Alira asked, settling beside him as the twin suns set over the crystal gardens. "About accepting the challenge, never." He pulled her close, feeling the warm presence of Scylan and Vexa through their bond as they joined them on the balcony. "Though I do sometimes wonder, what would have happened if you hadn't insulted me that night?" "Simple," Scylan said with a warrior's grin. "We would have found some other way to be insufferably arrogant, and you would have been forced to put us in our place, statistically speaking." Vexa added thoughtfully, "The probability of our paths crossing was quite high. The universe seems to have a sense of humor about these things. Or maybe," Rain said, gathering all three of them in his arms, "some things are just meant to be." As the stars emerged in the alien sky, for hearts beat in harmony, human and Veltheran, bound not by ancient law but by the most powerful force in the universe, love freely given and joyously received, the royal house of Velthara had indeed grown stronger, but more importantly, for souls had found their home in each other. And in the crystal ballroom where their story began, the light of the three moons blessed their union, shining down on a love that had conquered law, tradition, and the vast distances between worlds.